Part 1. The Hook. Picture this. It is the year 1718, the golden age of piracy. The Caribbean is filled with bloodthirsty buccaneers, treasure-laden Spanish galleons, and epic naval battles. Men of steel who laugh in the face of death. SFX, thunder, dramatic music. And then, there is Captain Barnaby Higgins. Right now, Barnaby is standing on top of a barrel in the middle of his flagship, the Scurvy Snail. Is he scanning the horizon for Spanish gold? No. Is he shouting inspiring words to his crew? Not quite. He is shrieking at the top of his lungs because a deckhand named Seagull-eating Sam accidentally spilled 3 drops of mild chamomile tea onto the wooden deck. Avasti! Barnaby screams, clutching his velvet coat. The ship is breached. We are taking on water. Man the lifeboats. Save the velvet. SFX, squeaky boots, high-pitched screaming. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Captain Barnaby Higgins, feared across the 7 seas, or at least the dry parts of them, is an aquaphobe, a pirate captain who is utterly, biologically, and hilariously terrified of water. He won't drink it, he won't touch it, and he certainly won't swim in it. His boots are coated in 3 inches of whale lard to prevent moisture seepage, and his daily hygiene routine consists of rubbing himself down with dry sand and hoping for the best. He smells like a warm sandbox, and his crew is starting to notice. But how on earth did a man who gets hives from a heavy fog end up commanding a pirate ship in the most water-dense region on the planet? Well, let us go back to where the madness started. Part 2. The backstory. To understand Barnaby, we must understand the 18th century Caribbean. In the early 1700s, being a pirate was actually a highly organized career choice. Nassau, in the Bahamas, was a self-declared republic of pirates. It was a magical place filled with rum, stolen silver, and absolutely zero tax collectors. Barnaby did not choose this life. He did not run away to sea to find adventure. He was actually a highly successful, exceptionally dry land accountant in London. He spent his days counting beans, filing tax returns, and enjoying the solid, non-liquid properties of cobblestone streets. SFX. Clock ticking, peaceful harpsichord music. But then, his eccentric uncle, Salty Barnaby the Elder, died of scurvy. Uncle Salty left behind a massive inheritance, a fully armed, 30-gun pirate galleon, and a crew of 70 bloodthirsty cutthroats. The catch? According to the pirate code of the Bahamas, inheritance was only valid if Barnaby personally commanded the ship. If he refused, the crew was legally allowed to feed him to the sharks. Barnaby looked at the English tax rates, looked at the sharks, and decided that piracy was the lesser of 2 evils. However, he quickly realized that the ocean is made entirely of water. This was a major design flaw in his plan. To survive, Barnaby developed a highly sophisticated strategy. He simply never went outside. He spent his first 2 years as captain locked in his cabin, claiming he was performing highly classified, strategic navigation. He communicated with his crew entirely through written notes slid under the door. Whenever the ship engaged in battle, Barnaby would yell instructions through the keyhole, such as, "Shoot the loud metal balls at the other ship while I analyze the psychological impact of our financial trajectory." Surprisingly, this worked. The crew thought he was a mysterious, eccentric genius. First mate Barnacle Bill, a man whose brain had been severely tenderized by years of rum and cannon fire, translated these notes into epic commands. "The captain says we must sail east," Bill would yell. In reality, Barnaby's note just said, "There is a damp breeze coming from the west. Please turn the ship around. My knees are shivering." Part 3. The problem. But a pirate captain cannot hide in his cabin forever. The year is 1718, and the British Crown has had enough of Nassau's nonsense. They send Governor Woodes Rogers, a terrifyingly efficient man with a wooden leg and a massive fleet, to clean up the Bahamas. Rogers offers a choice: accept the king's pardon and stop being a pirate, or hang from a very dry gallows. SFX. Heavy boots marching, dramatic drums. Most pirates surrendered, but Barnaby had a bigger problem. To get the pardon, he had to sail his ship directly to the governor's headquarters. And the weather forecast for that week? A massive, catastrophic Caribbean hurricane. We are talking 30-foot waves, torrential rain, and water absolutely everywhere. For Barnaby, this was not just a storm. It was a personal attack by the water gods. If a single wave splashed him, He was convinced he would dissolve like a cube of sugar. His crew was ecstatic. "We sail into the storm, boys," Barnacle Bill roared. "To glory and pardons." Barnaby, locked in his cabin, was hyperventilating into a leather sack. He couldn't just walk to the governor's office. Nassau is an island. He was trapped, surrounded by 3 million square miles of his worst nightmare, with a hurricane coming right at him. If he stayed, the British would hang him. If he sailed, the water would touch him. He needed a solution, and he needed it fast. Part 4. Attempts to solve. This brings us to Barnaby's legendary and exceptionally stupid attempts to conquer his fear of water. SFX. Upbeat, chaotic comedic music. Attempt number 1. The land ship. Barnaby ordered his crew to drag the entire 40-ton galleon onto the sandy beaches of Nassau. His brilliant plan was to attach giant wooden wagon wheels to the hull and simply drive the ship across the island to the governor's estate. "Think about it, Bill," Barnaby shouted from his safe, dry stool. "No waves, no sharks, no dampness. Just the majestic freedom of the dirt." The crew spent 3 days cutting down palm trees to make wheels. They hoisted the sails, the wind blew, the sails caught the breeze, and the ship moved forward exactly 3 inches before sinking up to its axles in the soft Caribbean sand. The axles snapped with a sound like a cannon shot, sending the mainmast crashing directly through the roof of the local tavern. The local land crabs immediately claimed the shipwreck as their new sovereign territory. Barnaby blamed the failure on poor geological alignment and went back to his cabin. Attempt number 2. The bubble suit. Barnaby consulted the ship's medical professional, Dr. Archibald Quack. Dr. Quack, who had obtained his medical degree from a cereal box in London, suggested total physical isolation. They spent 12 hours wrapping Captain Barnaby in layer upon layer of grease-proof sheepskins, sealed together with boiling pine tar and smelly whale blubber. By the end, Barnaby looked like a giant, greasy, terrifying sausage with a tricorn hat. He couldn't bend his knees, he couldn't move his arms, and he smelled so strongly of rancid mutton that a flock of 30 hungry seagulls immediately began following him everywhere, trying to bite his ears off. When he tried to walk on deck to test the suit's water resistance, he tripped on a rope, rolled like a log across the deck, and almost plunged straight off the bow into the ocean. Barnacle Bill had to catch him with a giant fishing net. Barnaby was cut out of the suit, covered in grease, feathers, and seagull bites, declaring the experiment a partial success because his socks remained dry. Attempt number 3. Exposure therapy. Dr. Quack decided that the only way to cure the captain's phobia was direct, sudden exposure. "It is simple science, Captain," Dr. Quack explained, holding a small wooden cup. "I shall throw this tiny splash of fresh rainwater upon your face, and your brain will realize that you are not made of sugar." Barnaby braced himself, clutching his dry leather boots. Dr. Quack threw the water. But Barnaby's survival instincts kicked in. He didn't just dodge. He panicked so violently that he did a backflip over the ship's wheel, kicked a loaded cannon, which discharged a 30-pound iron ball directly through the kitchen of the governor's outpost 2 miles away, and landed headfirst in a barrel of dry gunpowder. As he dragged himself out, looking like a very angry, charcoal-covered chimney sweep, he fired Dr. Quack on the spot. The storm was now only hours away. The sky was turning a terrifying shade of bruised purple, and the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. Part 5. The unexpected twist. With no options left, the crew forced Barnaby onto the deck as the hurricane hit. The wind howled. SFX. Howling wind, crashing waves. The ocean rose up like a giant, watery monster, ready to swallow the scurvy snail whole. Barnaby was tied to the mainmast, not out of cruelty, but because he kept trying to climb up the rigging to get closer to the clouds, which he argued were safer because they were technically vapor. Suddenly, disaster struck. A massive British man-of-war, commanded by the ruthless Admiral Stirling, appeared out of the storm. The British were determined to sink the pirates, pardon or no pardon. "Prepare the cannons," Admiral Stirling roared through his megaphone. Barnaby, looking at the giant British warship, then looking at the towering waves, realized he was doomed. At that exact moment, a colossal, rogue wave, a wall of water 50 feet high, crashed directly over the deck of the scurvy snail. SFX, massive water splash, screaming. Barnaby closed his eyes. This was it. the sweet release of death by moisture. The wave washed him completely off the deck and into the raging sea. But then, something incredibly weird happened. Barnaby did not dissolve. He did not drown. In fact, he didn't even sink. Because of the extreme shallow geography of the Bahamian sandbars and the fact that the hurricane had temporarily pushed the tide out, the water where Barnaby fell was only 4 feet deep. He stood up. The water came up to his waist. He looked at his hands. He was still solid. He looked at his squeaky boots, which were now very wet, but still attached to his legs. Huh, Barnaby muttered, as the hurricane raged around him. I am not a sugar cube, but the situation was still critical. The British man-of-war was sailing directly toward him, preparing to run him over. In a state of pure, adrenaline-fueled panic to get back to dry land, Barnaby began running through the shallow water. Because he was running for his life, he was moving at superhuman speed. To the British sailors on the man-of-war, it looked like a terrifying, grease-covered, seagull-bitten pirate captain was literally running on top of the water like a demonic lizard. By the king's teeth, Admiral Sterling gasped, dropping his spyglass. He is a water demon. Turn the ship. Turn the ship. The British helmsman panicked, spun the wheel too hard, and steered the giant man-of-war directly onto the shallow reef. The British flagship grounded with a horrible screeching sound, its wooden hull splitting wide open on the coral. They were completely disabled. Part 6. The Resolution. Barnaby crawled back onto the beach of Nassau, wet, exhausted, and accidentally a national hero. He had single-handedly defeated the most feared British warship in the Caribbean without firing a single shot. The local pirates cheered. SFX, cheering crowd, pirate tavern music. Governor Woodes Rogers was so impressed by this brilliant display of subaquatic infantry tactics that he personally granted Barnaby a full royal pardon and appointed him the official harbor master of Nassau. The job was perfect. As harbor master, Barnaby's primary duty was to sit in a very comfortable, very dry brick office on top of a hill, looking at the water through a telescope and writing angry letters to people who got their boats too wet. He never had to sail again. He lived a long, happy, and exceptionally dry life, proving that sometimes your greatest fear can lead to your greatest victory, especially if you accidentally run on water like a terrified lizard. And the moral of the story? If you are ever forced to face your fears, make sure you do it in shallow water, and always keep your boots oiled. SFX, squeaky boots, cheerful outro music. Now, go wash your hands. But not too much. You wouldn't want to dissolve.